Hey everyone, Ben Kumi Radio, episode number 287. So, I spoke previously at some point, I can't remember, me and Tom would have talked about it, about going to the Tony Robbins event in Florida, UPW. And I'm going to discuss on the show my experiences from one perspective. I'm going to speak about my experiences from another perspective on a different show. But the reason why I'm going to cover it in two parts is because myself and Tom... Oh, hello, Tom.
Oh, hi, Ben. How are you doing? It's nice to be brought into the conversation.
I thought it would only be polite. So,
anyway,
Tom,
as you were saying,
Tom and myself are big fans of looking at all areas of kind of understanding the human brain and body, how it moves, how it eats, how it thinks. And we've both been aware, Tom longer than myself, of a person's work called Sam Harris. And Sam Harris has written a book called Free Will. Now, this concept of free will looks at the way that we think, why that we think, and kind of looks to probe an area of who we are. Why are we the people that we are, basically? And Tom gave me his book, and I've read it, and we're going to discuss it. And we're going to discuss it and how that, for me, how that moves into some of the experiences and the information that I've experienced through Tony Robbins. And all of this is looking at the brain, how we think, and us moving forward more positively. So this idea of free will we'll look to define, then we'll look to expand the conversation, and then I'll start to build in my experiences with Tony Robbins and some of the processes that I went through, and try and amalgamate something at the end of it. So really today's podcast is a discussion on free will and our kind of conscious thought processes and what we do as people. So Tom, we should probably start at the top, and I will ask you, because I feel that your understanding and background reading behind this is far greater than mine is. Before we go into this conversation, what is free will? Let's define it.
Yeah, so a little bit of sort of background is just basically, as Ben said, like I got into looking at how and why people do what they do probably about 2 years ago now. So I'm not exactly the world's most well-read person on it, but I've done a little bit of background. And this concept of free will came up quite a lot because obviously it's difficult to discuss why people do what they do before discussing are people actually orchestrating their own actions. And yeah, so I came across this book by Sam Harris. Calling it a book's a little bit generous. It's about 70 pages long. But it's as long as it needs to be in order to make his argument. So in it, he basically argues that free will is the ability for someone to direct their thoughts and actions at will. The opposite of that is obviously you're not necessarily in charge of what you think and what you do. And another way to think of it is like, if you think back into the past, you could have done otherwise to what you actually ended up doing. And he kind of argues that that's not necessarily the way that it seems, and that free will doesn't actually exist.
So let's stop there for just a second, because what we want to do is we want to stand back and say, in the coaching world and the coaching environment, a lot of people, especially personal trainers, health coaches, practitioners, will say, we are in control of our actions. You choose to eat a thing, you choose to go to the gym, you choose to get out of bed at a certain time. And the reason why I want to say that before we go into this conversation of whether free will exists or not, when really, we're going to adjunct this and say it doesn't, there's a perception that we can control everything. And I think when we look at health and fitness, there's a potentially huge amount of anxiety around what people do and what they want to do, because they feel that they should be able to inherently control every action and belief around themselves and their actions, but they can't. But people around them are saying, don't be stupid, just go and do this, do that thing. But there's a disconnect.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of seems at surface level like you do have the ability to kind of choose what you do and what you think and all that, but if anyone that's ever been to school or university, school would be a good enough example. You can't, for example, force yourself to be interested in something. Like if for example you had an exam and it's in a topic that you find really, really dull and boring, you're not going to be able to sit there and force yourself to find it interesting enough to study it. So if we then expand that into the coaching realm, you're not going to be able to force somebody, and they're not going to be able to force themselves to be interested in creating a healthy diet, in going to the gym and exercising, unless you do some things that we're going to kind of talk about later. Another thing just kind of expanding a little bit more on Sam's point so that everyone's sort of on the same page, is if you were to have free will and fully orchestrate all of the thoughts that you've got in your own head, then that would literally mean what you'd have to do is think your thoughts, pick the one that you wanted to have, and then have that. But you can't think your thoughts before you've thought them. Mm. So it's very difficult to sort of say, right, you're definitely in charge of everything you do. I mean, if we look at it from an evolutionary perspective, if we go all the way back to the Big Bang, there's particles and molecules and stuff flying about kind of randomly. Some of them joined up together, that created planets. Some of them joined up together, it created the thing that eventually turned into a cell. And all of this stuff is happening really randomly and just, moving around randomly. Then over time, you've got evolutionary pressures, which will happen on things. So various different cells, and then as we get further in time, various different organisms will have these selective pressures on them. Random variations in their genetics will cause some of them to be more successful than others because of those selective pressures. And then eventually you've got you. So you are literally the result of a lot of successful and useful but random variations. And the thing is, you have random variations too. So if you think about your personality traits, so are you a conscientious person? Are you a particularly extroverted person? Are you someone that's high in trait neuroticism? All of these things are going to change the way that you think about stuff, and you haven't chosen to have those personality traits. They're inbuilt in you before you're born, because the way that your neurons are all wired up comes from your parents, who come from their parents, all the way back to that random variation that I spoke about a second ago. So if you've got all those things going on, it's very difficult to look at somebody and say, yeah, you're definitely in charge of the fact that you don't like doing X, Y, Z. I mean, we do know from some research that there are people who will crave food more than others. If you look at them on brain scans, generally speaking, obese people will crave food more than lean people. And they haven't chosen for that to be the case. It just sort of is. And the same thing with training. So people who enjoy training get like a big endorphin kick. Like, Ben, you go running all the time. After you go running, you'll have like this big hit of endorphins and you'll feel amazing. You haven't chosen to feel amazing after you train. You just do. And then you've got other people who don't get that same hit of endorphins, and it's very difficult for someone to go to the gym and pretend they enjoy it when after they leave, they just feel tired and a bit sore, and there's nothing they can do about that. So I think that's where we're going to come into later, where it's, although you can't really necessarily change these things, and there are parts of you that are inalterable, the way that you think about that and the way that you are aware about that is going to enable you to sort of work with it and do something a little bit different.
Mm. So when we talk about free will, we often or potentially believe that we can, think certain things. And I think that's where, certain schools of thinking around meditation and kind of more present-based practices look to kind of advance someone in. But the kind of premise of Sam Harris's book, Free Will, is saying that we don't have free will. So the thing that you think right now is the thing that you think. Like, you haven't changed it, you can't change it, you just become aware of that thought process, and then you have a choice as to what you do with that thought process. And we're built over years and years and years of our childhood, our environment, our genes, the things that we're exposed to, and the stimuluses are going to be stronger in someone's environment than others. And what we need to understand, and I perfectly buy into what Sam's saying, in that your thoughts are your thoughts. Now, that is one part of the equation. Now, me going away to this Tony Robbins event was almost then separating that gap, because there's gaps of thought processes, right? Our brain sends a signal, it has a thought, it's jumbled up, our conscious, or probably our subconscious mind first, starts to untangle that shit, and then our conscious mind goes, okay, I'm going to pick that bit of it. That sounds rational. And your brain's probably already processed through a couple of layers of what that thought actually was. And then that conscious thought ends up appearing in and around your belief process and your values and probably your habits and your traits. So the environment, maybe more of your adult life, is then starting to consciously jumble through that thought process and be able to do something tangible with it. And then we can stand there as people and go, that's a fucking stupid idea, and disregard it, or that's a great idea, or I'm going to make that decision, or I'm going to buy that thing. And I think what was really interesting about the Tony Robbins event that I went on is we were then looking at not that conscious layer, but that kind of layer between free will and subconscious thought, and how we can look at kind of understanding. So I've talked about self-awareness before, and I think self-awareness is a hugely important thing. Like, at no point are me or Tom and loads of other people going to sit here and say you can change the person that you are. I think, you know, we're going to say that, I don't know, 95% of that, you know, it's all done and dusted. What we're trying to change is how we experience those thoughts, how they translate into real world experiences and emotions and actions, ultimately actions. So self-awareness around who we are is fundamentally important. But having a self-awareness of why those things are fundamentally important. Like, I've spoken before about my upbringing and my dad leaving our home when we were younger. That shaped a huge amount of my personality, of my dad leaving, me not having kind of that alpha love in my life, and me wanting to try and experience and get that from my environment because I wasn't getting it in what would be deemed as a normal, biologically healthy relationship. So what the Tony Robbins event looked to do on one of the days was look at my values and beliefs and the things that have shaped me. And don't get me wrong, I'm already quite aware of that stuff, but what it really did is it opened up my awareness of how it had affected so much more than I was actually consciously aware of, and I found that absolutely fascinating. So from a coaching perspective and someone that's trying to help and empower people to change, I'm interested in this gap between free will and thought, and the thoughts that go through our head, and what we actually do as people and the actions that we take based on the beliefs and the values that we have.
Yeah, so it's exactly what you say. I mean, you don't choose your background, you don't choose your genetics, but you ultimately do choose what it is that you do with that. And whether that thought is, say you've got two choices of what you've thought something, you could respond to it negatively or positively. You can then sit there and you can choose which way you respond to it. Now, Sam's argument in the book is that whether you choose to respond to it positively or negatively, that's what you were always going to do. You don't have free will. You can't choose that. And yeah, that's an interesting topic, and it's probably true. I mean, we've got neuroscientific studies that show that people make decisions a few seconds before they're aware that they've made the decision, which is really weird. But for me, it's an intellectual argument that doesn't have any necessary bearing on what you do in the real world. So I think it's more appropriate to look at people. I've got some other books that you can read by some existentialists. So existentialism is just this field of philosophy whereby basically it's about finding yourself through free will and personal responsibility. And as we've just been saying, it's about acting upon the innate thoughts and the innate thought processes that you have and you can't necessarily do anything about, but making the best of it. So they make assumptions essentially that the world is hard. There's nothing you can do about that. I mean, if you look back at Buddhism, for example, the first dictum of Buddhism is that life is suffering. So that's an assumption that they put kind of first and foremost, but also that people are best when they're struggling against that suffering. So if something horrendous happens, kind of regardless of what it is, a human being is strongest and best when they're responding positively to that suffering and responding positively in a way that helps them to step forwards. So one of the main people that I think would be really useful to read in this for anyone that's listening or for yourself would be this guy called Viktor Frankl. So Viktor Frankl was a psychologist during the Second World War, but he ended up getting put into some concentration camps in Germany. So he was in Auschwitz, he was in Dachau, and he wrote about his experiences from a psychological perspective. And what he noticed was that the people who suffered most in the camp, but then found meaning in that suffering and responded positively, took it as a challenge and took it as something that wasn't purposeless, they were the people that survived the camp. So he's got this really cool quote, which is, between stimulus and response is the space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. And his thing was like, even these guys in concentration camps, like, I hope that I and anyone listening to this podcast will never be in a situation remotely as awful as that. But he was saying even there was people that could respond positively to the negatives that was going around them, and they could find meaning in that. And in the finding of meaning, that's where their happiness came from, that's where their purpose came from, and they were the people who were able to manage it all. So I think taking that and just sort of taking it back to the slightly more mild topic of coaching, it would just be a case of impressing upon people, and whether these are coaches, clients, whatever, that there's always going to be stress in life. So I've got some clients on at the minute, and one of them's going through some personal stuff with his partner, and I've just kind of been talking to him and just saying, like, look, you have two options here. Like, you've got these problems with your partner. If we separate that and put that out, there's loads you can do with that. But right now, here and now, you're a person that's got some stuff going on. You can either respond to that by saying, right, do you know what it is? I've got some stuff going on. That's my entire life now. Everything is negative. Everything is bad. Or you can say, right, I've got some stuff going on. I'm going to take this as an opportunity to grow as a person. I'm going to take this to potentially grow as a couple. And also, I'm going to take this as an opportunity to find what it is that really matters to me. And I'm not saying that means he has to then go to the gym and start eating chicken and broccoli, but I'm saying that it will be beneficial for him to not take that as an opportunity to go into a downward spiral and take on all of the negative sort of habits that he'd taken before, because it very much seems as though this guy's made a lot of progress. He started to make some positive changes, and then life has kicked him in the bollocks. And he's got two choices there. He can either say, right, life's going to kick me in the bollocks no matter what I do, therefore I might as well not bother. Or life is going to kick me in the bollocks no matter what I do, therefore I may as well make the best of it.
Life is going to kick you in the fucking dick all the time. Let's be honest. For the lady counterparts listening, it's going to kick you just where it hurts. We'll leave it there. And we've all got choices as to how we to respond to it. What I've got jubbling around in my head though, and I've got to make sense of, is, so let's take the Viktor Frankl example. You're in a concentration camp. Let's just, for conversation purpose, say 50% of people view this as a challenge. They're going to rise to it. They're going to survive. You know, they're going to use it as a character building opportunity. The other 50% are just basically there. They're waiting to die. They think, fuck it, I'll just try and live in case anything maybe positive happens, but I'm going down and out. Now, what has happened to build those two people is a case of their environment. Their surrounding, the way that their parents influence their principles on them, whether their environment and family was generally positive and forward thinking and of a growth mindset, and the opposite might be true of the other people. Now, where I see the beauty of Tony's work and what I learned at the kind of Unleash the Power event is that we are going to be that person regardless. And this is what Sam's saying, that we are that person. We've been built by that environment. But we now have a choice to become totally aware and understand what has created the person that leads to that thought process. And then we are allowed to then step back and take time and start to look at, I'm not going to say reprogram, but have almost like a secondary program. So if we think about all of this as like circuits, like we have this thought, it fires up and it goes through a circuit, and the next circuit that it goes through is our belief and value system, and then it's going to pop out the other side of that circuit into our conscious thought, and then out of that it's going to be our actions. So it's going maybe through these four processes. What Tony's looking at is changing the understanding of the wiring so that when it comes out the other side, we have more empowerment and ability to do something with that. Now, the reason why I wanted to reframe that, because I know I've already talked about that slightly, is because what Sam said, or what Tom said Sam said, is that we are going to do things both positively and negatively regardless. So one of the things that Tony talks about is emotion is motion. So wherever you put your focus in your life, your energy is going to be focused there. So like Tom's just said with his client, the client can choose to put all his focus and energy on the problem that he's got, which is only going to intensify and get worse, or he can choose to put 30% of his energy there and a lot more of it on his work, on his gym, on his friends, on cool shit in his life. So more of his daily energy and motion is around things that are more positive. And what we then do with this, and this is where I've seen negativity around Tony's work, is that we then look to continually program this into our routine. So before I went to the Tony Robbins event, I asked as many people as possible, what did you think to the event that I'm going to? And most people either said it was amazing, it changed my life, it was incredible, which is, in my opinion, it was amazing and it's changed my life, and I'll stand by that. And then there was a load of people that said, oh, it's a bit OTT, like they do a bit of salesy stuff, and it's kind of a bit out there. And I'm like, okay, great. All the people that said it's life-changing, it's amazing, for me, all of those people went into that environment totally giving of what can happen. They had no preconceived biases. They didn't think, oh, I want to get a certain outcome. They just went into the environment and said, I'm just going to be an experience and let someone else take me on a journey. The other people said, right, I'm going to get something out of this event and it looks like this. Oh, this guy that's jumping around on stage is a bit of an idiot. I don't really feel like doing that. And what I'm trying to get at is that throughout these 4 days on the Tony Robbins event, he made us very aware of our belief structure, our value system, why we do things. And he looked to make us aware so that we can create different systems of subconscious and conscious thinking, so that we can have a greater energy towards the things that we want to have energy about. So I'm going to give you, and sorry I'm going off on a tangent, Tom, but I need to get this all out of my head. So throughout so many of the different processes on the days at UPW, Unleash the Power Within, there was a lot of like jumping around, doing silly dancing, doing exercises with other people, and basically just having a bit of a party. And that's a lot of the highlight stuff that you see on social media, like 10,000 people in a room, like literally off their tits on energy. And I will not lie, it is 100% like that. And I now get, upon reflection, why it's like that. And for anyone that looks at that and think, oh, I couldn't do that, it's a bit stupid, for me, hasn't gone in and really looked at the core of why it's doing it. So I'll come back to my statement that emotion is motion. So where you put energy and flow is the outcome that you get, essentially. So put it like this. I go into an environment feeling a certain way about a thing. And Tony wants to take this thing and he wants to kind of reprogram it, look at it slightly differently and create a system around that thinking so that we can be more positive around it. And then he smashes that thing in the face over and over and over again with energy. Energy from your body. Dancing, you're thinking about it, you're celebrating it, which is what we try and do in coaching. We try and get people to celebrate the wins that they have so that they can actually draw positivity from it rather than just thinking, oh, onwards to the next goal, here we go. And I totally get it. And the reason why I get it is I walked out of that 4 days, and I will not lie, I've walked out those 4 days feeling like I was levitating across the ground, like I was wearing a Superman cape. And that was just through the energy that I had emotionally about who I am as a person and what it is that I want out of my life. And it is only, and it wasn't until like halfway through the second day that I could really feel this energy that I was creating from all this dancing, this celebration. And I'll be 100% honest, I went all in. And I went into that environment actually having a preconceived idea to some degree of what I wanted out of it. And I remember meeting someone at that event that basically broke down part of my sense of character and said, you need to let this process happen because you've still got some walls up. And she helped me break them down. She's an amazing woman called Cheryl, which we've shared a lot of experiences together at the whole weekend. But And this is why I'm so interested about these several conversations of like free will, conscious thought, what we believe, because we have the ability to shape around who we are. And so much of what I've shared on this podcast today over the 287 episodes is me sharing what I am as a character and as a person, but me trying to actually shape more and more and more positive experiences around that character to make sort of a person, a human that is really going in the right and meaningful direction for that purpose. And I'm going to shut up for a minute because I think I'm wearing myself out.
No, that was really cool. And I mean, I think one of the big things about that is that Tony Robbins, and what you just said there, you focus a lot on positivity, which I think is important to differentiate from happiness, because they're not necessarily the same thing. So you can be positive about a negative situation and you treat it a lot like a challenge and something that you can overcome and deal with.
So I'll just add a layer there. I wouldn't say it's positivity. I would say it's adding energy into what it is that you want.
Yeah.
That ends up being positive action.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's another thing that Viktor Frankl says. So he popularized this form of therapy called logotherapy, which is basically where he does on a one-to-one basis what Tony Robbins does on a 1 to 50,000 basis, where he just shows people that all of this negative shit in their life, if they just think, right, okay, that's a bad thing, you kind of get stuck in that situation. But if you think, right, okay, these are the positives, this is what I can take from it, I can grow as a person, I can attack this, and I can do something positive about it, then all of a sudden, although the situation hasn't changed, your mentality's changed entirely, and the way you think about it has. So what he does is he compares happiness to basically being able to get an erection, in that if you try really, really hard to be happy, it's not going to happen. And the same thing he says goes with blokes who will try really, really hard to show their sexual prowess, and all of a sudden they can't get it up anymore. Mm-hmm. And he says it happens with every single cognitive thing that we do, and pretty much everything that we do in your life. If you try too hard, it just doesn't come. What you need to do is you need to try really hard to be good and positive and moving towards what it is that you want without expecting to get there really quickly. So let's say, I don't know, you've got, as we'll talk about my client again, so we've got these problems that he's having at home with his partner. He can either think, right, okay, that's going to suck, I'm going to give it all of my energy, but that energy is going to be negative, I'm going to just sit and wallow and worry about it and be concerned. Or he can think, as I just said, he can think, right, I'm going to grow as a person from this, we can have conversations and it's potentially going to strengthen our relationship. That's a positive shift in the situation. Or he can do the other thing, which is where he says, right, that's a negative thing, so I'm going to ignore it and I'm going to go off and do other things because that's going to make me happy. And it won't, because he's just avoiding problems. So it is a case that it's worthwhile thinking, right, there's bad shit going on, and life has kicked me in the bollocks, but that's not a failing. It's not a bad thing. It's just a thing that I have to react to either by worrying about it or doing something about it.
Mm. So I think coming back to what I got out of the Tony Robbins event, I think, you know, I'm quite a self-aware person, and it's made me self-aware on a deeper level. And I think it made me aware that what had happened in my younger years, in my growing up, had actually defined areas of my character a lot more than I thought it had. And I think through my environment and my habits and the patterns that I'd got into, I wasn't aware of a couple of fears that I thought I didn't have, but I'd wrap them up in something different. And it's not till you spend time and working with other enlightened people that you actually really start to break down all these different layers. And I think this is why, you know, some people really struggle to unpick all of this stuff, is because you need someone really objective and you need a really honest and open relationship to be able to unpick this kind of stuff. And this is why I'm so grateful that I met the person that I met at the event, because one of the things that they try and get you to do at the event is they try and get you to meet a lot of different people. And it's probably because at some point you're going to meet someone that's going to have that connection with you that you can share really important shit with. And it wasn't until I'd met like the 8th person that I met this girl called Cheryl, and I was like, straight away, we didn't take any of each other's bullshit. Like, I was saying things, and you could see in her eyes, she's like, but he means something different. And it wasn't until like day 2 that we kept gravitating towards each other. And then, all of a sudden that evening we went out for a beer with each other. We spent flipping 3 hours unpicking each other's brains. And it was beautifully fascinating to be able to go all in on that process with someone else. But I had to keep meeting people in that environment to find that someone that would really be willing to delve into my brain and let me delve into hers, and to have that similar energy of what we were getting out of it. And it was kind of, I think I could have had that experience with many more other people at that event if more and more people had actually genuinely 100% been open to change. And the amount of people that say that they are 100% and genuinely open to change, it's not true. And I looked around the event at the end of the 4 days, and I did this every day because I was fascinated to see what was happening. You can look at into someone's eyes, and you can see the level of pain in someone's eyes. I feel I can, and I think other people can. And the amount of people in day 1 in that audience where you look around, and I was like, shit, I see a lot of pain in people's eyes. And then day 2, you see like 10-15% of the audience, like that pain starting to lift from their eyes. They're starting to realise things. They're starting to empower themselves. And then day 2 comes around, day 3, you see more of this pain lift and lift and lift. And I remember at the end of day 4, seeing people still towards the end, like not getting up, not celebrating where they'd come from, was still this massive amount of pain. And one of the most common traits I saw of all the people that would not give up their pain and change was the people that turned up in relationships. The people that turned up as a couple. They went as a couple and said, let's go through this experience together. But a lot of those couples were not like really open and honest with each other already. So they were hiding things throughout the process, which meant they were hiding pain and they weren't willing to give up. And actually, there was a couple of couples there that I noticed throughout the event literally looked like their energy was at one with them. When they cuddled, they were like at one with each other. The passion and love that those two people had for each other was absolutely amazing. I remember a couple sitting in front of me on day 3 that were a couple, and you could see that they were constantly whispering to each other, telling each other's like fears and pains and what they'd realised, and it was incredible to see. But for me as a coach that went all in and learnt so much for that process, it was actually quite horrible to see so many people not willing to give themselves up and let go of every ounce of pain. And it's not to say that forget things. Like, there was an amazing example in the audience where I was there, where Tony for about an hour and a half did an intervention with a woman that had like abuse in her life. Her daughter was in jail. She was looking after her daughter's daughter, and there were so many layers of pain there. And he, one of the things he said was like, "I'm not here to take away your pain. Like, I can't do that. The thing has happened, and we must be at one with that pain. But what I'm here to do is to make you realise that you don't have to live in that sea of pain every day. That there's massive amounts of positivity in your life, and that yes, that there is a thing that you don't like and is painful." But on many levels, this is strengthening you in your environment, and you have a purpose here. And to be able to see that someone can, if they're willing, be able to get rid of all that pain and see so much positivity in their life, I kind of almost feel blessed to have seen that and experienced it.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, I don't know if you're aware of Jordan Peterson. Anyone that's been listening to me talking that listened to him will probably hear a couple of sound bites that I've attempted to half-heartedly explain that he says sometimes. But one of the things he always says is like, there's nobody in the world that doesn't have some shit going on. Like, everybody is either ill, or they've got someone in their family that's severely ill, or if they don't yet, they will soon. Everyone's been through bad breakups. Everybody's got these fears that come from childhood, and like every single person has these, and it's very, very rare to see someone actually work through them properly. And I think that's one of the things that really comes out of another one of Sam Harris's books called Lion, which is where he just basically argues that 100% honesty all the time is always going to be the best option. So when you were saying there about the couples that aren't quite able to fully explain everything to each other, we know what they're thinking. We know in the back of their mind they're like, oh, I can't say this because they might not like it, because it might damage this relationship. So they've got a fear about releasing these other fears. And that's always going to be a net negative, because that fear is still not going away. And you've still got this knowledge in the back of your mind that you've got this thing that's in your past, or this thing that's in your head that your partner doesn't know about. And that is eventually going to cause some kind of problems. And it just speaks to how important it is to communicate properly with people and with yourself, and be 100% honest about how things really are, rather than thinking, oh, if I pretend to myself that this is the crack, then it will actually be that way. Because, like, what are you going to do? You're going to change the way that your mind works. Like, it doesn't work like that. You've got to just kind of accept how it is.
Yeah, I mean, at no point am I changing who I am as a person, but, you know, the processes that I went through at that event, understanding myself, has deepened my relationship, has deepened the love that I have for other people in my life. It's deepened the sense of clarity around the mission that I have as kind of a nutritionist. You know, one of the reasons I do this podcast. It's given me such a greater understanding of everything in and around my environment that's enabled me to experience my life in a richer way. And, you know, the time and the money that I gave up to go to that event, for me, is absolutely priceless. Like, I can't put a value on it. The value is greater than the money that I paid to go there and experience the event. And to everyone that has been to that event in the past, and maybe, I'm not saying you have to have as a positive an experience as I have, but I would raise the question for anyone that came out of that event and thought, oh, it was a bit OTT, it was a bit over the top, like, you know, I'm not that bad. Like, I would raise the question, did you go all in? Were you really ready to change? Were you accepting to actually look your fears and pain in the eyes and say, okay, I'm gonna be at one with you right now, and we're gonna wrestle, and it's gonna get ugly, but shit's gonna get real. We're going to identify things. We're going to start to become at one with that. And we're going to start to build layers of more positive things and growth on top of it, so we can experience a more richer and rewarding life professionally, personally. Because I just think we deserve that to ourselves. And if I'm honest, that's what I saw in people either speaking negatively or positively about Tony's events. And to leave that event, and, you know, we talk about Americans being like woo-ha and having energy and fist pumps and awesomes and shit. But fuck, like, leaving that energy and seeing so much like personal triumph and the willingness to just want to go out into the world and do incredible things and to love and to succeed in thousands and thousands and thousands of people was absolutely incredible. I'm going to go to the event in April in London. When you've been to a Tony Robbins event, you can then go and work at the event. So I'm going to go and work at the event because I want to feel that energy again. I want to see other people winning at their own their own fears and beliefs. And I'll probably go to the event again as well after that, because I just don't think you investing 4 or 5 days in moving yourself forward on a personal level, I don't see how that's not going to benefit you. And if I can just keep looking to chip away and deepen those layers within myself, I think that's only going to be a positive thing. And I think, you know, I'm very grateful, and I should probably take a moment to thank Jesse Beardsell for helping me get hooked up with the event and Tony Robbins, and making my experience a lot more rewarding. She's on our academy, and she's a big fan of our work. So thank you again, Jesse, for helping me get to the event and experience it in a way that I did. And I think if anyone's thinking about, you know, going to an event of that nature or that exact nature, just ask yourself, do you want to move yourself personally forward? Do you feel that there's things that you want to work through that other people have not been able to help you through? Do you think you're willing to open up? Then fuck it, just give it a punt. Like, I think general admission tickets are like £500, £600, £800. I'd say it's wholly worth it. Unfortunately, your hotel stay in London is probably going to be just as expensive. But for me, I just went in, I cut the bullshit, I went all into the environment, and I feel that I've benefited on just so many ways. And I like to think that I'm going to be able to help a lot more people close to me and further away from me in a lot more meaningful way as a result of that experience.
Oh, that's really cool. I mean, as you say, it's kind of worth a punt. I mean, there is a lot worse things that you can potentially risk that amount of money on, considering the reward that you can get from it. I mean, personal exploration is going to be different for everybody. I think from my perspective, just literally having listened to you talk about it and watched the documentary, I mean, full disclosure, I've never been to one of these events. I think it would quote unquote work for some more than others. I think if you are not just an open person, I think extroverted people would do better at events like that, whereas introverted people could take an alternative route into the journey. I think meditation, conversations in smaller circles with complete honesty can do a similar thing. But I mean, God, if you're the type of person that's slightly extroverted, you'll love something like that. And I think the enjoyment factor in them, what you'll actually take from it is it's worth so much more than any money that you'll spend on it anyway, as you said. So,
yeah, very true. And the only thing about extrovert and introvert is, you know, in terms of character traits, do people display, you know, genuine introvert and extrovert tendencies, or is a lot of our character traits and how we express them based on the things that have made us and defined us? And is it, because what I'm getting at is it a true expression? Like, if you looked at me, most people say I'm an extrovert, but I'm an introvert. And correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of what I've seen, people will define an introvert and an extrovert is, if you have free time to yourself, how do you choose to spend it? I choose to spend it most of the time by myself. As an introvert, most people that would be extrovert would choose to go and experience that free time with other people. And that was one of my core understandings of what defines an introvert and an extrovert.
I think introversion's quite complicated. There is an official definition that I can't memorize, but it's one of the big 5 personality traits. And I think the best way to determine it is, if you spoke to a room of people for a day, would you leave feeling energized or exhausted? Mm-hmm. Because it's, as you say, you can manifest different things. So I mean, yeah, you might like spending time alone, but at the same time, you go and you'll enjoy an event like Tony Robbins. Me, for example, a good example is, because I consider myself to be an introvert, we'll go to expos, me and you will leave and you're absolutely buzzing. I'll leave and I'll need 2 days. Like, I'm just done because I've been speaking to people for 2 days. And I think that's the big one. You get what's called an introvert hangover.
The only thing is, I'd say you and me perform very different roles at an expo.
Yeah, there's probably some of that.
You know, I'm up on stage.
I think that's a good way to judge it. It's how do you feel? See, after 4 days at a Tony Robbins event, I would need a week off. Mm-hmm. To just sit with my cat and read something. but as I say, I mean, it's going to vary between person to person because it's not introvert, extrovert. There's a spectrum and you're going to sit somewhere on it. And I don't think you have to be all the way to one end to enjoy a Tony Robbins event. I think there just may be some sort of variance in mileage, shall we say. But they look great fun. And I think, as you say, if it's something where you stand a really good chance of taking some like profound personal development from it, you can. There's so many worse ways to spend money, man. It just seems so worth having a go of.
Definitely. Anyway, something to think about. I think me and Tom will probably go away from this podcast and reflect on it quite a bit ourselves on what we've said. I think we'll probably revisit this topic again, and we'll maybe look to bring an expert or two on the show and open this up. I personally find this fascinating. I don't know about everyone else. I just think, you know, we can talk about health and fitness as much as we want, reps and sets and food and broccoli and shit, but how the mind works, how we behave, why we do things, I think is absolutely fascinating. Ultimately, it governs whether we do the reps and the sets and the move and the run and the eating the chicken and broccoli and rice. So I just think it's a fascinating conversation. Hopefully we've made some coherent sense today. I know some of my thoughts were kind of jumbled, but I've got probably so many emotions still floating around even after 2.5 weeks of being at the event as to, you know, how I'm feeling about it. But for anyone that's new to the show, because I know this show might have gone out to some new audiences, thank you for tuning in. Hopefully you've enjoyed the show. There's lots of different other shows as part of Ben Coomber Radio where we talk about loads of different stuff. Either way, I hope we've brought some value to your ears today. If you enjoyed the show and you wouldn't mind spending 2 minutes to leave a review on iTunes, that would be immensely grateful. That's how the show grows and maintains its good ranking. I think I looked this morning, we were number 15 in the world. This morning when I looked, we're quite often in the top 10, which is something that's very cool, and I'm very proud and grateful of all the support that you give the show all the time, so thank you very much. If you see us on social media or you see the show posted up, feel free to engage with us, maybe share your experience. You know, there's a post that's going to go out on Facebook, on Instagram. If you want to share your experience of, you know, Free Will or a Tony Robbins event or anything you think there's value to be added into the conversation, or you just want to share your experience, please share your experience. Me and Tom would love to read it. I would love to see what you felt and experienced from your own personal development journey. Otherwise, if you want to find out more about us or me, go to bencoomber.com or go to bodytypenutrition.co.uk or follow either Ben Coomber, Body Type Nutrition or Awesome Supplements online, the 3 brands that we run here. Otherwise, thank you until the next show. I will have a guest next week. Me and Tom will see you in 2 weeks' time.
Thank you very much. Cheers for listening, everyone.
And in the meantime, everyone, stay awesome. Goodbye. Hey everyone, Ben Coomber Radio, episode number 286.